The art of losing isn't hard to master. So many things seemed filled with the intent to be lost that their loss is no disaster. Lose something every day, accept the fluster of lost door keys, the hour badly spent. The art of losing isn't hard to master. Then practice losing farther, losing faster, places and names and where it was you meant to travel. None of these will bring disaster. I lost my mother's watch, and look, my last or next to last of 3 loved houses went. The art of losing isn't hard to master. I lost 2 cities, lovely ones, and vaster, some realms I owned, 2 rivers, a continent. I missed them, but it wasn't a disaster. Even losing you, the joking voice, a gesture I love, I shan't have lied. It's evident the art of losing's not too hard to master. Though it may look like, write it, like disaster. Mostly what comes to mind is the small things, actually. I mean, it's about loss, of course, so usually we tend to maybe think about the more dramatic parts and the more dramatic side of it, but it reminds me of just the little things that sometimes we forget and then we're reminded of them, you know, the small things that we appreciated from a person, from a place. Not as a bad thing, actually. In a way, I mean, the tone is kind of accept these things, you know, in a way, that the everyday things that we lose, basically. Actually, I wrote also a poem about loss, in a way, and it wasn't sad, which is strange, because when you think about loss, you would tend to think that it would come out sad. And in the end, the poem that I wrote about it came out quite nice, you know. It was about when my granddad died, like, I think it was last year, and I went around the house, and it was empty of him and empty, you know, obviously. And I was looking at all these little things because they hadn't really taken out all the stuff yet. And it just reminded me of all these small things that you didn't really used to pay attention to. But now they're not there anymore. This kind of gesture that I love and stuff like this. I remember when I used to eat with my granddad, he had like, a cut on his feet. And I would push my feet against the cut and feel the cut of his, he had a cut here, so I would feel it with my feet. But I used to do it as a kid just because it felt weird. And I was just reminded of it maybe 3 months ago, that I would not feel that thing again, you know? So it's almost like these things, you kind of forget them and then they kind of come back to you somehow. Their loss is no disaster. You kind of keep them with you also. I lost a wallet. I didn't care about the wallet. It's funny, you know, like there was all the money and the credit cards inside, but there was one picture inside and it was of me and Rudolph, my ex-boyfriend. And it was, I think it was more than just, you know, the picture of us together, but it was what that picture was. It was on a summer day in the countryside. And I think I remembered, I like to have that feeling in my wallet, you know? Mm. And I remember that when I lost the wallet, it was kind of like a piece of, you know, a collected piece of feeling that I had kept with me that had been taken away from me. And I remember that was very difficult to deal with. How would I define loss? Yeah, maybe, so I guess it would kind of feel like a little bit of yourself kind of crumbling, I would say. Which means that whatever you attach to, that can be a person, that can be, I don't know, a tree, you know? It can be just a place. I remember, I dream about the places I lived in because I feel like wherever you are and whatever is around you, yourself becomes entangled with it, you know? And you attach to it. So I guess, yeah, a little bit of you leaving, kind of, you know. I would say that it's a bit like departure, in a way. Well, I don't deal with it very well. Alcohol, lots. how do I deal with loss? I cry, I think. I don't know if you can deal with it. I think you have to nurture it in a way, because I don't see it as a negative thing. I've always imagined that actually all the things you lost end up in some kind of cemetery, and you have to go and water the plants on the cemetery. You know, like, I was thinking about it 2 years ago, and I've lost a bunch of people that I've loved and lost a lot of places. I mean, you know, I love my family that lives in France and I don't live there, so that's, you know, always kind of something, I'm not there with them. But I kind of think, you know, they're just parts of yourself, and they're not necessarily gone away. They're just not here physically anymore. So sometimes how I deal with it, I spend some time on my own and I go and visit the things that are lost to me mentally. You know, I try to remind myself of them.
What's your favorite line in this poem?
Actually write it, which is not even a line, it's in parentheses, you know. But it's interesting because it reminds me of all the times where I might have been dramatic when I faced loss, you know. But I always wrote about it. And actually now going back to those writings is what makes me realize that it's okay. I'm okay. You know, because I'm still alive in a way. You know what I mean? Like, at the time you're experiencing it, it feels very kind of, you know, maybe kind of a part of yourself detaching from yourself, right? So it's kind of scary, right? And you feel like you can't deal with it. But interestingly, when I open my diaries and I open my poems, I find so many traces of me kind of, you know, going through that, and yet I'm still here, that I feel like at the end of it, even if it looks like disaster, the writing of it kind of reminds you that you're still okay in a way. You've still managed somehow to recompose after it, you know. So yeah, I like this poem. But interestingly, a friend of mine wrote a poem that's a villanelle also and similar. She tried to copy the structure, and actually it's about loss also, and I even like hers more. Which I don't know why, maybe also because she's, you know, a friend of mine and somehow close to me. But her poem was about the loss of a person, just one person, you know. And she was describing it as the kind of tide taking things away from you. I kind of realized that, you know, the young part of my youth was behind me, but I was entering a kind of more, I don't know, kind of a careful phase, you know, where I have to kind of, you know, think, oh, I know certain things that I appreciate now, so I want to organize my life accordingly, you know. And I was losing a bit of that kind of carelessness and carefree spirit that I used to have in the past, and I was afraid that I would lose it completely, you know. So I was, am I gonna become too much of a grown-up and lose that part? My life is taking a certain direction, which means a loss of other possibilities. That sometimes it's a bit hard to deal with, you know. But somehow, you know.
So it's losing something that you don't even have but might have, right?
Of course, I think these are the problematic losses, the possibles, you know. I could have done this. All these losses, all these things that I've never had and will never be, and imagine the loss of those things, you know. So for me, actually, I find that the loss of the things that have not been and will not be, or might be more difficult for me to deal with, actually. Interesting. The thing is that in general, I think we tend to think of it as a negative thing, or as something that is, you know, to be seen as difficult, a disaster, which does look like. I experience loss that way, but I don't think I see it that way in the end. I feel rich of the things that I have lost in an interesting way. Actually, I feel richer of the things I've lost than of the things I have, which kind of makes no sense. But to me, it does, you know, like these things that are not physically and not materially and not, you know, present to me, if I manage to kind of like you know, have them within me, somehow they're even more present. I mean, it's funny because I never used to think of that house that I left until I left it. And then I left it and it became alive strangely, you know. Sometimes I think that losing things is the only time where they kind of take on meaning.